Okay, I am back. I said I was going to be about 5 minutes. It's about 5 minutes. I brought my drink with me. And I really wanted to talk about this as well. So these are two pretty serious, kind of heavy videos today. Like, tackling the tough issues, the sad issues. So this video is going to be talking about incels, the kind of scary tactics. Hi, Susie, welcome back. That are going on, right? And they've been a rise in this term. This is to do with a term that comes up with regards to shootings and other violent behavior. It feeds into a sexist ideology, unfortunately, a really awful sexist ideology. But I also, for my own thoughts, found it interesting that the conversation around the sex trade was going on at the same time. And my thoughts on that, and how there's been some interesting shadows of this in different facets, and I'm going to try and cover all the facets and how I think about it. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Moon in Cancer, that wouldn't surprise me right now. We're all heavy as fuck. So the rise of the incel is the involuntary celibate, and it is a title being attached to particularly young men who are using this as a reason, quote unquote. Hey, Cosmic Whisper and Danny. They're using it as a reason for violence against women. It's like their justification for violent crimes, up to and including murder. And is how I feel about it. So there has been a rise in the language, which is very, very aggressive against women. And there's this idea that to the minds of these young men, that they're entitled to sex with women, and that women aren't giving it to them. They are denied, and that is their justification for hating women. It's a very strange leap to me. It's clearly certain the young men so far who have engaged in actually murdering people, and I've forgotten what the name of the one that they call their Messiah, the guy that first did it. He was clearly psychologically not well. Clearly. And the sad thing about the incel movement is they actually, some of them label women as being psychotic by nature. We are all psychopaths by nature. Yeah, I think it was Roger something. I'm kind of partially tempted not even to use the names though, because they don't really deserve that kind of recognition. And there's a video circulating, and it's been in the news quite a bit, and we've obviously had another example of a shooting. Thank you, Xerxes. And we've had another example of a disturbed individual shooting up kids and blaming it because a young girl didn't want to have anything to do with him. She rejected his advances. I also saw the video of her mother saying that the young lady who had died had been saying to her younger sister, I'm going to stick up for myself and tell him that this has to stop, to set an example for her younger sister, to show that you need to stand up for yourself. And then she ended up being shot. So the rise of sexism in the particular climate that we're under, politically, socially, does not surprise me. For a long time, especially when I was growing up, in my growing up years, there was a very strong girl power theme. I grew up with the literal branded girl power Spice Girls being on the charts. I am British. And hi, Molly. So I grew up in that era. I grew up in an era of Buffy being on the TV, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Charmed was on TV. And there was some really strong female warrior archetypes growing up. Like, even younger than that, there was blooming Xena on TV. And in all facets of life, I could see strong women as I was growing up. You've got some examples right now, for sure. But I have a feeling like there is this weird lack thing that goes on with regards to how women are perceived right now. There is more than I have ever seen it in my lifetime, short as that might be. There is now more of an emphasis on the damsel role. Like that being thrust forward. And there is problems with that because there are also women who utilize this idea of victim and damsel role to get away with shit. And I'm going to cover that later. None of that, however, excuses incel violence. Let's not say that that does, because it does not. People who murder other people, they're looking for reasons, I guess. That they are not well. There is, I will talk about that too. If you stand up for yourself or any other woman, you are called a feminazi. God, I hate that term. I hate that term too. Because honestly, I understand why certain people feel negatively about feminism, because there is extremism within feminism which is no better than the hatred that they're trying to target. So when you get feminists which are extreme and they're promoting this extremism, they're kind of killing it for anyone who's in feminism for a balance, for a purpose. Hey, Hellbound. And the extremist feminists, honestly, it doesn't help anyone. For like the ones that really do declare war on men, I don't think that's helpful. It's not. But as Random has already said, and I was about to say, there are extremists in every single branch of thought. All of them. Whether it's spiritual, whether it's social dynamic, all of it. There will always be extremists. There will always be people who cannot find the balance. And honestly, balance is usually the way. And balance doesn't have to mean exactly half and half anything. It's just the natural rhythms and flow of... I wonder if there are extremists within extremism. Probably. We're going to rank you on an extremist level of 1 to 10 per nut. Anyway. So I think that the game is bigger than feminism. I feel that regardless of gender or race, it's about good people versus evil people in this world. Xerxes. So I'm very, very hesitant about the labels of good and evil, because I think people are multifaceted. I think people are capable of deeds of great evil. I think people are capable of deeds of great good, if you like. But the concept overarchingly of good and evil is inflexible, it's rigid, it's putting people in boxes. People can change. Now, the thing about people actually changing is that takes time, effort, and they have to really have that drive in themselves. And there are people, because in psychology, I did some studies when I was studying psychology. Beautifully put, Joey. And they were people who society would consider to be evil people. So there were pedophiles in this study, and there was a couple of them that didn't want to be this way. They felt there was something mentally wrong with them, and they went through all kinds of trials and invasive procedures to try and stop themselves from being that way. So the pedophiles in that group would put electric rings around themselves, around their penises, and if they were showed pictures, and if they got aroused, it would electric shock them, and it was trying to stop that behavior. Now, they willingly signed up for that. They weren't forced into it. And it was a very interesting psychological study of, are they then evil? Or are they mentally unwell and they're trying to fix it? It's a very weird thing to sit and contemplate. There definitely are people who enjoy inflicting pain and suffering on other people. Yeah, there are people who go as far as castration, but you don't need, like, my sociology teacher said this to me and it haunts me for the rest of my life, you don't need a penis to rape someone. So castration isn't necessarily the answer, but there are people who go that far. Yeah. So pulling that back to the idea of what the incels are saying, there is definitely going to be an element of the dogma of these people is on the internet. So now that's immediately problematic. You don't, like I said, you don't need a penis to rape. And a lot of it is they try and do stuff with chemicals to try and stop the reaction. Anyway, the incel movement is largely online, so a lot of the propaganda that they're putting out there is on forums, and there of course is a problem with this, because there is a natural tendency for people to behave in extreme ways on the internet to shock. And whether or not most of those individuals that are saying that stuff even believe it is questionable. Are people just like, I don't know, are there men on there who are ranting because they've had a bad breakup and they're in a bitter place and they will move from that bitter place? Are there people in there who are just out there to like push people's buttons as kind of a social experiment and see what happens? Probably. But the problem is that there are individuals in these groups that then will take that propaganda and they will implement it. Exactly. Some might be trolls, but it frees the jackanapes. And so there was a few stories around the incel thing that I thought was personally kind of frightening as a woman. So one of them was like, a fun thing you can do, no kidding, is follow women home so it makes them really, really anxious and nervous. Extra points if you get them to cross the road, extra points if they like pull out their keys and like hold their keys. And he was like, don't go as far to actually rape her or anything, but if you can get in her head, then you've won. And I was like, looking at it like, almost every single woman that I know, and probably some guys, it is, the incel thing is real, unfortunately. And there are people saying that incel is young men who are classifying themselves as involuntary celibates because women deny them sex. And then they go out and commit violent acts against women. And yeah, in America, someone like that is probably going to get shot. But the thing about this is I know, I can probably guarantee most of the women that I know have been through that situation. I've been through that situation. I've been followed home or pepper sprayed. To be honest, they kind of deserve pepper spray. That's not permanent. And it can be really frightening, because it used to happen to me when I was a teenager quite a lot. I was early developing when I was like 13. Like, I looked 18. I had some situations as a 13-year-old that frightened the hell out of me. And I mean, I looked at ways to protect myself coming home. I was looking into methods of self-defense. And it's really kind of sad that that's the reality for nearly all women. I'm always really hesitant about these conversations, because I'm not saying that men don't get harassed. They do. I'm not saying men don't get followed home. They do. I'm not saying that women don't behave crazy towards men. They do. So just to say that as we're going through, it's not necessarily just one side of people getting into this, but the incel thing is gaining momentum, and it is hatred towards women. They classify women as psychopaths without emotional responses. We don't have emotions, we don't have brains, we are just literally somehow walking around talking. I mean, how big is the stereotype for women talking about their feelings? But apparently we don't have any. I'm just going to read a few comments before I carry on. So Phoenix says there's a fine line between evil and being mentally ill. What's worse is I know some know and thrive and willingly believe their own lies because they cannot or will not face themselves in the mirror. There's definitely like a narcissistic trait in a lot of the psychopathic behavior of some incels. The main guy was definitely psychopathic. You could, in his video, it was weird and creepy. It was meant to be, as someone who is mentally ill, I don't think there's a fine line between evil and mental illness. It's a huge line. I think the mental illness conversation is problematic when it comes to these sorts of situations because people already stigmatize mental illness. I personally think we need an overhaul of what we classify as mental illness because technically psychopathy, sociopathy, these violent behaviors, these things that are wrong with people on a mental, emotional, psychosomatic, even biological level are still classified as mental illness the same way that depression is or anxiety is and things like that. So I really do feel that we probably need a reevaluation of the terminology because lumping everything in is not great. It also lends to the argument that everybody who's mentally ill is dangerous. This isn't true. Mental illness is such a wide variety of different conditions. There's a huge stigma there, and if we were to reevaluate mental illness, I think everyone is mentally ill under the current paradigm, probably. Very, very probably. And so lumping people who are psychopathic in with people who are, depressed, for example, is not helping our understanding. It's not helping us to prohibit death. It's not helping us towards anything at all. It's sad that I don't know a single woman who hasn't been through that, myself included, says Sapphire. So Sapphire's referring to the being followed home. I don't know any women who've not been through it either. So yeah, and Jen says she's had a few people follow me home. And then obviously we've had the famous examples, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and now Morgan Freeman has been pointed at. Yeah. Random says I carry a knife and pepper spray. I used to have a taser because I've been followed and stalked a few times. These were things when you don't think about going anywhere alone. Yeah, absolutely. Cosmic says my grandma told me to keep wasp spray in my car. Pepper spray is temporary. Wasp spray they need an antidote for. I keep a taser too. There you go. Hi Kalinda and hi Johnny. So I don't even know what to advise. Like, you come into and have these conversations and you're thinking, what do we say to people? Like, what is the advice? What is the action to be taken? Why have we arrived at the point where young men think they are entitled to sex? Although there are women that think they're entitled to sex as well, to be fair. Where does the entitlement come from? Why are we living in a place where it's given real rise to this? Is this a new thing? Is this just coming out into light now? Has it always been a pattern of thought? So for me, I mean, the first thing is we've got to be teaching our kids. We've got to be teaching our kids because they're the next generation. So you're not entitled to anything. We're not entitled to anything, especially not from other people. And I don't even know if it's so much sex ed as it is empathy ed. Jen says she thinks it's always been there, but it's easy to read about it today. More people aren't afraid to say this is not okay. Well, it definitely has been going on in Hollywood because all these stories that are coming out now have been going on for a long time. So it's definitely been going on. And see, like, I'm on the line because I'm like, is it actually lack of sex that's causing this, or is it nothing to really to do with that? Is there such a focus on prowess, if you like, of sex that we lose the depth, we lose the meaning, we lose the respect, we learn the consent? No, I'm going to find the first guy who they call their Messiah, because the first guy that they called their Messiah is a few years back. So I've forgotten what they called him. The sad thing is people are calling this a rebellion of men, and I'm like, how is this a rebellion? Is it Elliot Rogers? Yeah, it's Elliot Rogers who is the first one who they termed this. He was in 2014, and he had uploaded a video, and he was talking about how he was going to kill everybody, and he, yeah, Elliot Rogers. That's the original one they termed incel. It's about power and control. It's not about sex. Well, rape definitely is. So you're very probably right. Like, because I'm like my mind was going to talking about how sex is simultaneously venerated in our society, particularly to sell things, but the depth of it is not there. And then it's also treated like it's dirty and disgusting and a taboo. So there's that, which creates kind of like a confusion, a mismatch within the brain, which I can understand. I think that's a really good point. I like that, Kuru. So Kuru is actually sex just as a ritual between masculine and feminine energies. It's alchemy. I like that. I like that a lot. And I feel like that if that's what we taught or were taught, I think that would go a long way to addressing the perception of sex within and what we say sex is. Because I honestly feel like because sex is something that is basically sold, that's why people think of it like a commodity. Like, sex is okay on the internet as long as there's a price tag attached. Have you noticed? So it's okay for underwear people to sell pictures of women wearing not very much. And you'll see adverts like that on Facebook and places. But if there is a artistic rendition or a statue sometimes of a naked woman and there's a nipple, no, ban. And it's insane. It's like, so it's okay when it's people's pushing sales, but it's not okay when it's a natural celebration of naked form. Uh, bu- 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 bu. People, yeah. So I honestly feel like if the conversation around what sex actually is was changed from what it is right now, I think that that would go a long way to helping the energy around this in general. And there is definitely there's a difference, right? There's a difference between people who are getting resentful. We need a live chat on the sexual sacred sexuality techniques. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll ask Casby how he feels about that. There's also a need for openness and talking about sexuality, though there is a good point. I mean, it becomes such a thing of shame and like disgust and like gets pushed down under the screen that it's hard to have a conversation about it. I don't think men want to rape. I don't think that's necessarily what's happening. I think that okay, rapists want to rape. Rape is not about sex. It's power, it's control, it's fear, it's domination, it's humiliation. And that's what the incels are about online. If you've read any of this stuff, and I'm in two minds as whether to tell you to read it or to stay the fuck away from it because it's horrid. But that's what they're doing. They're like, women are things, women are objects, women don't feel, women don't think, and that's a rapist mentality. But sacred sex as a conversation, sacred sex as something to promote would address it, because it becomes I'm going to talk about that in a second, Danny. Then it becomes something which is not like taboo. It's not a problem. It's not under the table. It's not disgusting at the same time as I was wanting this all the time. And then people sell stuff off that because it's taboo. Right. So Danny said, I think sexual prostitutes were an outlet and something kept in ancient societies together in a way. So the idea of the sacred whore is what you're talking about. And I was actually musing over this point myself, because I had noticed that along with this rise and this attention on the incel thing is the attention on the sex trade or the sex work industry right now. On the one hand, they're trying to prohibit it. They're trying to, run it out. And honestly, trying to get rid of the sex trade is like trying to get rid of abortion. All you're going to do is you're going to make unsafe versions of this. It's not going away. Like, as these things have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Prostitution is one of the oldest trades in the world. It's not the oldest trade, but it is one of the oldest. And if the rise of the grooming nags in the UK, that one I don't know. I've not heard of that one. I'm going to go look at what that is. Oh, gangs. I was going to say. I was like, what's like a nag? I thought that was a term. Anyway. Yeah, the whole girl apocalypse, just with sex workers in harm's way. So this is something that I was thinking about from a number of perspectives. So I was like, sex work is going to carry on regardless. So why on earth are we still like an ag is my bad spelling. Awesome. So if we just legalize the sex trade, right? And if we just gave those women the rights to them, but their own bodies, if it was like legalized, if it was kept above board, there would be less of a problem in there. Like, the sex trade as it is right now with regards to selling sex and not within regards to abusive things like trafficking, unfortunately they can join because it's a taboo subject, because it's illegal, because it's beneath the surface again. So if this was just made, yeah, the issue with human trafficking and forced prostitution is common. The percentage of those who are doing it without any force is probably quite small. So if we were to make it legal and regulated, it would help with that situation, because it would be harder to do that then. Amsterdam has a really good information and care system for sex workers. They're able to get healthcare through their work, insurance, legal and police protection, etc. Exactly. Prostitution could be legal, but not sex trafficking. Exactly. I'm not going to make an argument for abducting people. No. That's not what we're saying. I'm saying that if a woman has decided of her own free volition that that's something that she wants to use as her job, her career, her profession, if she has freely arrived at that choice herself, then, like Cajun just said, regulate it, tax it, require testing, let them unionize. Exactly. And I honestly feel like because I'd been watching this whole situation with the woman on PewDiePie, and that's an ongoing situation on YouTube, and he was calling her a thought. And there's this whole thing on Twitter with women who are basically cam girls, but they're not calling themselves it. And I'm like, well, why not just legalize it all, and the ones that are doing it just have it as soft sex work or whatever, and you can even like have degrees of it, you know. So I mean, okay, if it was going to be legalized, if prostitution was going to be legalized, there would have to be all sorts of things put into place: regulation, tax, and testing. Now, testing can be psychological testing, psychological help, psychological support, as well as obviously like being taxed like every other job is taxed, and that. So there would be elements that I think are necessary, and you can get psychological help for all kinds of different jobs. And so for that would definitely have to be one, because you would need a transition period, because we don't have that ideal situation in the beginning. So you would need things to be put in place to protect the rights of the women, the well-being of the women, the physical and mental and emotional well-being of the men and women who would be involved in I don't know if you could honestly make it sacred prostitution in this day and age. You could definitely have people who were doing that, if it was legal. But generally speaking, I think it would be better if it was legal and above board, and that would help cut down on the criminal aspect, on the abuse aspect, and all the rest of it. So, and yeah, exactly. There would be a huge transition period with harsher regulations for a bit, where ones are looked at on a case-by-case basis to determine whether people are being forced into it. The other thing about that is then there would be like an age requirement. There'd be a minimum age requirement, obviously, the same way that there's a minimum age for actually having sex with people who are, consensual. I mean, it's still consensual, but not paying. So there would be age things going on, there would be healthcare going on, there would be like a psychological aspect going on, there would be a big transition period. And I honestly feel like that would be a good outlet for all kinds of things. So if these people really are sexually frustrated, there you go. If prostitution was regulated, above board, honest, and available, that's no longer an excuse for that. Drink Apple said, I can never imagine going to a prostitute. Casual sex is excessively easy to find these days. No need to lie, manipulate, or play games. There are hundreds of people who are promiscuous people out there. If prostitution was legal and or whatever, then that's incredibly honest. It's more honest. Because it's not pretending that something is going to be something else. It's just acceptance of human physiological needs and an exchange for that. Most incels I've seen don't use the excuse that sex workers are hard to find, rather that it's not real enough for them. Okay, so that's going to be that would be their excuse then. Again, when you're entering into a sexual bond with someone, now I have a very moral, I guess, way of looking at sexuality, because for me it has to mean something. It has to have emotional connection behind it. It has to be spiritual for me. And so I walk the line with this, because obviously my experience and what I require is not what other people want and require from a sexual relationship. So I'm trying to find like that balance between most incels are not bitching about sex. They want companionship. I mean, I've never heard any of them ranting about lack of companionship. All the rants that I've seen are sexual in orientation. Men have to deal with sexual frustration just as much as women. I think for young men, it's a part of society's expectations of them. There definitely is. And Random says, yeah, if you want companionship, why would you rape? Therefore, it's a lie. Yeah, basically. So it's one of these really difficult conversations. I think they vent through the language of sex and sexual frustration, because voicing loneliness and vulnerability is seriously difficult for men in Western society. There is definitely an element of that, but we're gonna say that the people who go over the edge and like hurt people, it's not like you've gone over a line. It's no longer about you being lonely and vulnerable. It's about power games at that point. It's technically like murder like that is kind of a form of rape. It's life rape. It's stealing away what doesn't belong to you. They actually find solace in their incel groups. They're actually actualizing more entitled behavior, or further isolating from women that don't want them. I think people are losing what standards are actually needed to meet a partner. You don't get people interested in you if you aren't worried about improving your own person. Okay, so meeting people, I think, is actually technically easier than it's ever been, because of the internet. The internet has problems with meeting people, obviously. But to be honest with you, anyway, meeting people has its problems. I think it's easier to connect with people online than it's ever been, and it's easier for us to find solace than it's ever been. Unfortunately, the point about them finding solace with there are other people in the incel movement is an unfortunate binding together of dangerous theories. Meeting with them is easy, so is fucking connecting with them is more difficult than ever. I mean, we live in a disposable society. We live in a society where everything is right now and then everything is disposable. This is true. And I think the only way that we can push past that is having these conversations, is having real conversations about what the issues are. I feel like men like this have gone through so many instances of rejection that they project their insecurities onto women and start seeing them all as stuck-up bitches who don't like nice guys. So I often wonder as well, though, because the Rogers guy, he was only going after a very particular kind of woman and being rejected by a very particular kind of woman. So I think, to be honest, there is ways to connect with people, and that go deeper all over. We can find connections with individuals. I don't think it's necessarily all about what's on the surface. The problem is, particularly in more recent generations, the emphasis is on the shallow. The emphasis is on what is on the surface. The emphasis is not about how to connect and go deeper. It's very much about how somebody looks. Hellbound says it seems easy to not become social, and I mean face-to-face social skills. One is not going to meet a partner playing Halo 3 or surfing YouTube and Facebook. Well, you can find partners playing video games and on YouTube and Facebook, because people do it. But there is definitely a difference between online interactions and then in-life interactions, for sure. And it's just, maybe we need to be educating about that gap. Maybe that would help, about how we relate on an interpersonal level. But there definitely is a emphasis on the shallow, and it worries me, though, that the dialogue and the discussion becomes a woman's not worth anything because she's refusing to put out in the incel situation. Like, an individual's worth isn't whether or not they are sexually engaging with anybody. So, sex is the missed ancient magical act and is now being treated like currency. Not a lot of people I hate are trying to advise lonely, young, depressed girls. When some of these girls commit crimes borderline bipolar, girls being lonely isn't attacked. I mean, I can't think of any instances of females shooting up schools and murdering people. If I'm wrong, then bring me an example of girls shooting up and murdering schools or whatever. I have said within the context of this video that there are women that harass men and young girls that harass boys, and there absolutely are. And I have said within the context of this video that men are the victims of sexual harassment, and this is true. But the incel movement is hatred towards women. It just is. There are people in the incel community saying women are psychopaths, devoid of emotions, devoid of intellect, devoid of rights. And I mean, if you want an empty vessel to have sex with, you can buy them. So it's not really about that. And I mean, like, empty vessels. I mean, like, the jars or honey jars or whatever they call them. I don't know. The fleshlight things, them. I can't think of any instances of men killing others simply than a lack of sex. This is a false narrative. It creates more division between men and women. Sex robots for incels. Maybe that would work. I'm joking, of course it wouldn't. Yeah, I know. There definitely is more of a conversation than just the idea of the celibate conversation. There is definitely a hostility that is being perpetuated. Women do commit crimes, violent crimes. They do. And honestly, they should be held to account just the same way. And that's what actual feminists would want, not extremists. Because if you want balance, if you want equality, then that's women going to prison when they've murdered someone just the same way. I consider myself to be feminist, and I would want that. I would want women who false claim a rape and some act of a sexual nature, the ones that lie about it, I'd want them to be held to account too by the law. Balance. I don't think that the idea that women should play this damsel in distress role or victim role is healthy for anybody. It's not healthy for women. It's not healthy for the perception of women. It's not healthy for men's interactions with women. There is also that. It's about how the internet allows for a group gathering centered around rape and violence against women. There is that, Goose. That's a very good point. How that's being allowed to just keep going without any kind of crackdown on it. Molly says there's a systematic imbalance when it comes to women's rights. It's not just about individual men hating on women, it's institutional. There definitely is problems in the institution and how women's rights are looked at. There definitely is. Drink Apple says perhaps there is an epidemic of young men externalizing their rage and loneliness just as a rise in young girls harassing each other and self-harming. There is a connection here. Actually, self-harm is on the rise across all genders and for particular age ranges. But this is the thing. I'm going to shock the world now. Young women want sex. Young women feel lonely. Young women want companionship. Young women feel rage. And men harass each other and men self-harm. We're all human and we're all capable of the plethora of human emotions. When we're going through the teenage years, it's like a biological imbalance that happens. We know this. This is a documented phenomena. And there is definitely a swell of emotions that are sometimes out of our control. And the need to educate and communicate to young people the depth of being with another person is something that I feel is sorely lacking. We don't talk about the depths of connecting to another person. Like human biological sex ed is about as far as it goes. This goes here, this goes there, then you have a baby. And there's almost no like deeper conversation about that. There's no relationship advice. There's no, I mean, for me, it's sacred. So that's how I would take it. But I understand that other people wouldn't see it that way, especially if they're not religious or spiritual whatsoever. And I wouldn't want to kind of enforce that on the conversation. So for me, it would be sacred. It would be spiritual. It would be transcending self and the deepest connection you can have with another person. But if you want those deep spiritual connections, to my mind, then that rage doesn't have place within that conversation. Like when you're spilling over into a conversation about rape and hating women and women having no rights and women having a job to do that they're not doing, you're losing the depth, you're losing the sacredity, you're losing the connection, which we're saying is what these men are suffering from a loss of. Times are changing. We've got a bit of a backward political system right now, which is problematic. Sadly, I think the male psyche is in a state of fluctuation and the male identity is being forced into a negative role. There are definitely elements of that. I mean, The problem is with the analyzing a lot of this is we're actually analyzing media and how things are portrayed. And that's a problem within itself. Like how things are presented through media is problematic in and of itself. Sapphire, there are a lot of women, myself included, who are hesitant to call their significant others out for pressured sexual encounters and what does and doesn't classify as rape. I believe there are spiritual solutions to these gigantic problems, but most people are becoming nihilistic and most are divorced from spirituality. I agree. And I guess the best way to address that is kind of like on a humanism level. When you've lost a connection to a spiritual connection, I guess, that then we have to talk about people like a humanistic, a depth of emotion, a depth of connection, the depth of honoring each other as people, and stop thinking that one gender is more inclined to want sex, because I honestly feel like that's bullshit. I honestly feel like it's bullshit that like all men desperately crave sex and all women don't. I don't feel that that's true at all. I just feel like the conversations we have about it are all wrong. I feel like if we had real honest conversations, if it was celebrated, if it was seen as something pleasurable and connective and fun and meaningful at the same time, and having a depth at the same time, and it wasn't just like a surface level being sold as something thing, this would help. The warrior, the sage, the king, the fool, all great masculine role models, but they are old role models, not modern ones. Honestly, we probably need to return to old role models for like a lot of us, like not just for masculine ones, but yeah. I mean, I wonder sometimes if like the bringing back of a healthy sexual male divinity into the modern consciousness would help. Like if we had like you bitches need coronanos, would that help? Like I'm using the B word like sarcastically, but like if seriously though, if we had like a pan or a coronanos energy, and that was something to be venerated and honored, and there was like that hunt element of, you know, going out in the forest and being free and wild abandonment and getting back in touch with nature and things, would that help? I wonder. Well, I mean, I find that a shame during couples. As I've aged, I've lost libido, and I'm grateful for it. I don't value it anymore. I will release. I will always value it. So that's kind of a shame. I can understand the perspective, though. Yeah. I think it would be a solution increasing acceptance for men, women. Oh, hi. Hi, just Jonathan. I found your channel through the Passing to Toe Biscuit. Well, hi, welcome to the channel. It's been a serious couple of videos. Also, the playful side added back into male divinity. Yeah, there's definitely. I think that would help with spiritual circles. But like we have been saying, like a lot of this conversation is for people who don't feel connected to the spiritual on any level. And I understand rejecting certain dogmatic religions. I understand that oppressive thing that people reject. But the majority have Jesus and still don't see the value in equality and generosity and compassion. So I don't think a pagan deity would help. Do you think Jesus is relatable to young men? Because I don't. There's kind of like an abstinence vibe to Jesus. I mean, the modern portrayal of Jesus, anyway. I honestly think a little bit a male pagan deity that's robust and fun and wild and engaging. Like, can you imagine if young men like were encouraged to go on the wild hunt? keep it separate from sexual connotations for a minute, and they were just like they could get dressed up or like battle painted and go chasing through the forest, and it was part of like becoming a man, and there was like rituals around that. It would be fun for a lot of them, maybe not all of them. Random, I look forward to a time when gender is no longer separated. Maybe then we will be one. Define roles help build identity, though. I think dissolving gender is not good. There are some who can be both, but the major identifies one or the other. I don't know that we're going to get to a point of destroying gender. I don't know that we're going to get to that point. They keep Jesus buttoned up. Yeah. We do carry both energies. Yeah, we definitely do carry masculine and feminine energies within us. We do. There is benefit in abstinence, but that's hard to sell to hormonal people. That again has to be a choice, though. Like you can't have like the whole thing is we can't have enforced abstinence, but yeah, Jesus and Mary Magdalene doing the nasty is suppressed by Christianity. Yeah, pretty much. I just wonder. I mean, that's obviously from a spiritual perspective, and from a non-spiritual perspective, when people are not interested in that being part of the conversation at all, unless it is to suppress sexuality and conversations around sexuality, and then conversations around violence that is a mirror, is not actually a conversation about sexuality, because the violence is not sexuality, that's violence. But the two kind of run parallel to one another. Yeah. And chat is discussing gender constructs right now for anybody watching later. I'm like, all these in-depth conversations, guys. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's not damaging to have these conversations. That's why I appreciate Joe making videos like this. People would rather sweep it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. This is true. Something akin to the Wild Hunt would be a good place to start. That's Phoenix. I think it would. I think having an outlet to be wild and to get in contact with that. I also think it would help everybody, not just men. But if we were like teaching skills, like survival skills, like hunting and fishing and building what's the word? The word's gone straight out of my head. Shelters and things like that. Getting more in touch with like some of the older aspects of that. I think we should have a bit more of that alongside like the modern advance of technology and things. I honestly feel like experiences like that would probably help us balance the online offline interconnections with different people. Rewilding, exactly barefoot. I think that people also need survival skills for sexual abuse as well. Well, like moving past it or protecting themselves or that sort of thing. We have no rites of passage anymore, says the Cajun. Yeah, that's what I think. I think there are a lot of some good old ways of masculinity that would, that would help. Some fun competition, like, I don't know. And we could have all kinds of masculine forms of competition in the mainstream if we wanted to. It doesn't have to just be like the physical stuff. You could have like mental exercises. You could have gaming things. You could have things around gaming. You could have things around like mental stuff. You could have all sorts of things. I mean, with the advent of blooming VR technology, you could have all sorts of fun play with around what in virtual reality could be, you know, things like that. Yeah, I think, I mean, I do. I think video games and the competition there is it can act towards it. I honestly feel like it needs to be in balance with some of the other stuff. I'm a big fan of video games. I love video games, and honestly, video games are sometimes more psychologically helpful than people realize. So, yes, I think it would be beneficial myself. Classic masculinity seems irrelevant. Women keep saying they don't want provisional protection directly from men. This is the crux of the matter. Well, okay, this is how I feel about that. So there is an advent right now about the idea of the damsel in distress mode for women, and they're trying to make it a thing again. The problem is that I have seen women abusing the idea of the damsel in distress role model in order to excuse shitty behavior towards men and women. I mean, I don't think it helps. I really don't think it helps. Like, I would really love a world where it wasn't really about protection, but it was about two warriors standing side by side. That's the epitome of a relationship to me. I don't mind someone wanting to protect me as long as they are happy for me to protect their back too. Thank you, Hellbound. And then it's not about control so much as it is about teamwork for me. That's how I feel about it. Like, that's my ideal. Like, two warriors having each other's back. I mean, that's just using an analogy, obviously. But that's, yeah, two people building their personal kingdom together. Exactly. I honestly haven't had any conversations with women where women are like, yeah, like, I don't know women that like fuck men in their roles. I don't know women like that. Now, there are women that do it, but I honestly think they're in the minority. Like, there was the woman who attacked PewDiePie, and her vocabulary was horrifying to me because PewDiePie called her a thought, and she'd been on Twitter with her ass in the air and her tits out and all the rest of it, which is her choice. But it's then PewDiePie's choice to call her a thought, I guess. And she went after his money, and she's still going after his money. And she's calling herself a victim. She's saying it's harassment. She's saying she's been abused as a woman, and she brought like it was a feminist thing. It's not. Like, you going after some guy's money is not a feminist thing. It's you playing a game and then playing the damsel in distress card. And honestly, that kind of interplay between men and women, I think, is really damaging. And that's what the damsel in distress shit leads to. People yeah. It's horrible when people take the legitimate cause of survivors' inequality and use it for their own personal gain in a way that bastardizes the original movement. Exactly, Goose. Exactly. And I've been watching those videos and the news around them with a sense of horror, because that's like, don't make out that this is a cause for women, because it's not. Like, it's not. And that again is like, oh, I'm being attacked, some man save me, someone come white knight me, and I don't. Alinity, that's it. And that she's still doing it. And what does she want? She wants money and fame. And I honestly feel like that the ideologies of protecting women allows that shit to happen, honestly. And I would much rather just have a balanced relationship between men and women who take care of each other. And like I was saying, I'd seen this video I think it's an old video of Will Smith's, I don't know. And he was talking about the fact that he had to bring happiness into his life and offer that to his wife, his best self. And she was responsible for her happiness, and she had to offer him her best self. And they came together like that. And that was much more healthy for their dynamic than thinking that one person can provide all of something for you as an individual. And I think that feeds into this. The fact she still tries baffles me. The alinity stuff gives me the heebie-jeebies. It really does. Again, I think what they're doing should be labeled light sex worker and just regulated. I think some of the others were saying it creates an us versus them mindset, which is toxic as fuck. Yeah, the us versus them thing is definitely toxic as fuck. Hi, I'm Gulseven. Is that right? I'm sorry if I butchered that. I may have butchered that. Well, it's basically cam work, what they're doing on Twitch. It's basically cam work. And I don't think it should be a demonized thing. I think it should all just be regulated, and there you go. I'm a single father who wants to choose a horrible woman around my daughter. That woman abused my child. I failed at protection. Never again. Okay. What you're saying right there is your role as a father to protect your children. That's completely different. And I am too. I'm sorry to hear that you've been through that. That's not something that I would ever wish on anyone. I understand it. I've been in a position of being sexually abused myself as a child. So I understand the anger and the pain that comes from that. I also understand the feeling of guilt when it's happened to someone else that you care about, because my sister was, and as well, and I had hoped to protect her by remaining silent. So I understand the thought process by which you go through and the feeling and the things behind that. I understand that 100%. Protecting your children is a different dynamic. You do protect your children as best you can from the harsh, difficult realities of the world. And sometimes situations and people come in and it makes that impossible. And it's not that you failed. It's that somebody with a malicious, evil intention found a way, which they will because they're hyper intelligent. And you have to continue to protect your daughter. You have to continue to help your daughter grow, heal, and learn to protect herself. So it's the example right there. So there is there's abuse. That's okay, Goose. It is a really difficult subject, I know. And we do need to talk about it. So that's why we're doing it. It's horrific that men suffering at the hands of women abuse isn't as taken as seriously. This is true. There is definitely if it helps you, it helps you. Whatever makes it through. You have to also be at a place where you're not holding it over your own head, though. You have to be able to live and keep your daughter living, because it can become a sticking point. Yeah. And don't allow one monstrous individual to be the like Justin has just said, don't let one monstrous individual become a model for all women, because it's not the truth. This is something I had said. When was I saying this? I think it was yesterday, day before. That there are both men and women capable of really horrifying actions. And there are men and women who are capable of deep, emotional, beautiful actions as well. And unfortunately, there are just people who are awful and don't feel any kind of accountability. Because what I love about spiritual community as a whole, it seems to be one of the more compassionate and protecting everyone. There are obvious exceptions, but I'm glad there are videos like this where people are willing to discuss these things with considerate perspectives. Yeah. Okay. I think we've kind of we've come to a point where it's probably a good place to start rounding off. We've been live for an hour and 10 minutes, so I should probably go and have some food. And thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you for sticking with me for the entirety of this live. It's been a long ass video. Thank you guys for discussing it with me in very respectful terms. That's great. We did really well. That's the example we want to lead about how we have a conversation and a debate. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys for being so active in the comments. That means a lot to me. It's a difficult subject. Yeah, and thank you guys for being supportive of each other as well as me. That's really, really lovely. So I'm going to go now. Thank you guys for joining me and I'll see you next time.